To my regular subscribers, welcome back to my YouTube channel. To the people that are new, welcome to you, okay? My name is Yana Mavumengwana. I am the clinical psychologist that shares this beautiful channel with you guys. Welcome to another Tuesday. We don't have Tingo today, and that is because I didn't bring Tingo to PE. So I don't know if actually Tingo wouldn't have been present in this video. Otherwise, we actually have one of my favorite subscribers, because well, I've got access to her, that actually journals and has a Tingo every Tuesday, to do her own reflections on what she has learned. So I know you guys don't trust my judgment anymore when I'm like, this is not going to be heavy, because you guys are like, you said it's not going to be heavy, but it was heavy. Anyway, one thing I can promise is that we're not here for long. I don't know about heaviness, but I don't think so. And today we are discussing the phenomenon of adult children of alcoholics. I'm presuming a similar dynamics would arise for children of, I suppose, substance abuse homes in general, but I've decided to isolate it to just alcohol abuse because that is, well, the narrative I would resonate the most with. I suppose the biggest thing that obviously would emerge in clinical practice and sometimes studies about adult children of alcoholics would obviously be having the tough adult task of negotiating trust. And this stems largely from the fact that typically your parent when they are sober and your parent when they are drunk are completely different people, and the capacity of how they are able to execute responsibilities largely depends on sobriety. So it's a gambling game to know when are they going to execute the responsibility, when are they not going to execute the responsibility, because substance abuse is hardly ever uniform. This is the thing with ambivalent parents. This is why they are sometimes worse than bad parents, because bad parents, you pick your stance very early on and you negotiate your life in a particular way and it's predictable. Ambivalent parents, such as substance abuse parents, don't offer this sense of predictability because they aren't always drunk and they aren't always sober either. So you play a negotiating game of giving the benefit of the doubt, tasking them with a particular responsibility, and you simply find out at the execution stage if it will be done or not. And therefore, usually the outcome is people that it produces kids that either at the other side of the extreme, that are incredibly naive and insist on placing trust into the hands of people that have proven themselves to be completely incapable of holding that responsibility, or swinging it to the opposite extreme of being overly self-reliant and deciding that other humans are in fact poorly dependable and they refuse to place trust in their hands. And I suppose a therapeutic goal would then be to negotiate this balance where you can make a fair judgment call about when to assign trust to others and when to assign trust primarily to yourself. And it's an ongoing engagement, because if you run a team, you're going to be an incredibly poor leader if you find it hard to assign trust into the hands of other people that haven't done anything to let you down. Teams have very poor innovation, make poor contributions when there isn't a good culture of trust within the organization or within the institution. And you can't do this if you helicopter and you micromanage because you think you're the only person that can execute something successfully, because you've got poor trust issues in the skill set and dependability of other people. So it makes you almost a micromanager and sometimes incredibly autocratic in how you approach other people, makes you a bully. Where are you? What did you do? Who are you with? Etc. etc. Because trust or sketchy, or sometimes it produces the opposite, where you literally, I suppose what most developmental theorists will tell you, trying to resolve the childhood task even as an adult, where you are still hoping, nursing the hope that one day this person can actually stand up for you, that one day this person can actually choose you. So you insist, despite repetitive feedback, that this person is poorly dependable, giving them an opportunity to prove themselves, giving them an opportunity to prove themselves. As a result, some cohort of studies will produce that evidence that actually adult children of alcoholics prove to be very, very naive. And this is why their therapeutic goal is to negotiate the concept of trust and find a fair balance, because life will demand you to do both. Life will demand you to notice naivety and actually know when to own trust and just rely on yourself, because people can sometimes be poorly dependable, but also knowing when to find the right time to back off and I suppose trust that others will show up for you and actually give them a chance to give you a corrective experience by indeed showing up for you. So that's another big thing that if you are an ACOA, you need to pay attention to to actually open yourself up to receiving a corrective experience by taking the risk to trust other people. The nice thing about this is that if you've chosen to be the opposite, self-reliant person, is that when you eventually learn to trust others, you trust them from the stance of protection, that should they let me down, I'm anyway used to taking care of myself. So it's not a complete train smash. You can afford the risk to, I suppose, outsource some things that you had to do on your own because you couldn't trust another person to do them for you. So I hope you give yourself that grace to decide, I've surrounded myself with solid, dependable people and I can afford the risk. Yes, it is a risk because they can let you down. You can't read people's minds. But the nice thing about over-reliance is that should they let you down, it will hurt, but you are so well experienced at taking care of yourself, so you'll be able to pick up the pieces and keep it moving. So yes, dare risk, dare trusting again. It won't completely backfire, and if it does, if you could survive it from your parent as a child, you can certainly survive it from other adults. As an adult, you're much more resourced at the moment than what you were. I suppose another big thing would be I suppose the notion of anxiety or anticipating threat of being in a position where you don't know if you are vulnerable or not. As a result, ACOAs always have the developmental task of negotiating vulnerability. Because I think this comes from the obvious notion that when a parent isn't always sober, you never know if they are sober today or not until the door opens and they come home, if they're going to come home, which is another thing. You don't know if they're going to come home. You don't know if they're going to come home hostile. You don't know if they're going to come home violent. You don't know if they're not going to come home altogether, meaning you only know what kind of parent you have, or if you have a parent at all, when the door opens. So this leads you to always being prepared for whatever odd may happen when that door opens. So this happens a lot through dress rehearsing tragedy. This is what people call foreboding, where they actually sit and imagine all the possible worst case scenarios that can happen, because preparation makes it hurt less. When you were somewhat expecting that it could happen, usually it hurts less. So this, I suppose, comes from preempting tragedy, because you know actually tragedy could happen. It could happen that your parent is dead wherever they are. It could happen that they're going to come back and hurt you or hurt other people in the house. It could happen that they're going to come back and hurt themselves. It could happen that they're not going to come back altogether, and all of those are very unfavorable stances to be. This is especially true if you actually put yourself in the shoes of a child, to think, what must it feel like for a 7-year-old to not know if your dad is going to come back and hit you, to not know if your mom is going to come back somewhat partially injured or hurt the other people in the house, or if they're dead wherever they are. It must be a very terrifying experience, and obviously it breeds the two opposite extremes again of a person that is always prepared, almost very foreboding kind of personality that has somewhat set and imagined all kinds of possible scenarios, and that thing is exhausting. You may think it's beautiful over planning, but the limitation is that energy is spent actually being very poorly productive, because you are planning for multiple scenarios that are never going to happen. There's something about predictability that invests thinking resources in the right things, in the right outcomes that are expected, because you expect your parent to do X, Y, Z, so you prepare for just that. Then you can become effective at that thing. But you waste time where you assign your cognitive resources to 10 billion things, because it could be all 10 billion outcomes. Yay, because the outcome is one, but the fact that there are so many of them that could be a possibility is what breeds the inclination to over-prepare for all of them. Or sometimes it swings to the opposite of a person that is incredibly anxious. As a result, most of these ACOAs actually have anxiety disorders, because anxiety by definition is an anticipation of threat, and not knowing what lies on the other side of the door is in fact threat. I know for people that know me personally, they know that my dad battles a substance abuse problem, and I can tell you one of my biggest worries, I suppose, was not necessarily is he going to come home and cause harm to me, although that was also a possibility, but it was the fact that the people he's with, wherever he is, were aware of the fact that there isn't a masculine figure in the house, rendering all of us at a more vulnerable position, because by Amazi, obviously each family system will have its own different example, but it makes you ready for threat. And obviously I was more at the opposite side of foreboding and preempting the threat, so that was but other people swing to the opposite side of perceiving themselves to be so vulnerable that they really battle understanding when in their futures and adult lives they are safe again, making them incredibly clingy, making them incredibly vulnerable and in worst case scenarios, totally dependent, in needing someone to be overbearing and protective towards you, because this is just a thing that is so aversive for you to feel. Ikukumbuza an experiential conclusion that doesn't come from a good place. So that is yet another thing that can happen. And I suppose obviously another one would be, I suppose, the inclination and the vulnerability to alcohol abuse yourself. You know, strangely, actually, because alcohol and the smell and I suppose the dynamics surrounding alcohol also are then attached to your concept of home. There are some things that are nurturing about home, or things that alcohol will trigger that aren't necessarily unpleasant. And as a result, even if you don't drink, you may be vulnerable to those. I will tell you, the smell of cigarette isn't a smell that is off-putting for me. Although for most people, actually, the smell of smoke is like, there's something homey about that scent, because obviously that was the scent of home and the smell of particular alcohol beverages. I don't drink alcohol, although I don't drink alcohol. Actually, the smell of particular alcohol beverages is something that I find particularly pleasant and odd enough when I'm pressed in terms of pain. Although I don't drink, the temptation to drink is highest there. I don't drink alcohol. That's how strange it is. I don't drink alcohol, but if I'm really heartbroken and shattered and whatever, it's one of those, I suppose, exit doors that I'm probably vulnerable if pain were to push me over the edge to accessing. By the grace of God, I've somewhat had restraint over that, but I also know that the thought is there, that the more painful the situation, the higher my need to not be sober. And I suppose, because I'm a psychologist and the many years of therapy, we have substituted, is that the right English? Yes, substituted that need with much more potent and stronger coping resources that make it incredibly rare. And I'm hoping impossible for me to access that as a coping resources, but I know subconsciously the thought and the wish is there. So I try to stay away from things that will cause me pain, because I don't want to ever know if the pain were to be severe. What would I do? Other people aren't as fortunate as a result. Most people that have grown in alcoholic systems end up to be alcoholics themselves, because the balance of how to recreationally drink and when to put the brakes on isn't something that is actually properly trained. And of course, children are very good at observing models. So this is why it's easier to model a particular life to your child than to teach it to them, because children learn by observation. So I suppose that would be another risk to actually look forward to and pay attention to as an adult, that you're actually much more vulnerable to alcohol abuse than what you think. There's many more, but those are the ones that I wanted to highlight, that I'm hoping you can work through as an adult to negotiate the aspect of trust and to maybe create scenarios and create experiences, open yourself up to experiences where you can feel safe in the world. I hope one of it where you can do that. I suppose mine is, there's very few people in my life that abuse alcohol, and that is intentional, to not surround myself with people that overdrink. And I suppose the more intimate my connection is with you, the more I prefer it if you don't. And I suppose in romantic spaces and whatever, eventually, if you like, you can even make it a deal breaker that if you abuse alcohol, that ain't happening, means you ain't gonna vibe, and whatever. But yes, I hope you can negotiate trust a little bit better, or maybe even understand yourself a little bit better when people say you've got trust issues. And I hope for the people that are incredibly anxious, I'm hoping you dependable setups where you don't have to sit and anticipate threat, but also I'm wishing you the insight to know that you are so resourced at the moment that even if threat were to come, and I suppose another big thing I should touch on briefly would be, I suppose, the kind of defense mechanisms that actually tend to accompany alcohol abuse, and denial is one of them, where it teaches you to actually exist so comfortably amongst dysfunction that in actual fact, because it was home and you couldn't escape it to go anywhere, you learn this way of existing comfortably in a nonsense situation, because you can't physically leave. And I wish as an adult you can start to learn that you don't have to mentally, this is where defense mechanisms come in, where you learn how to mentally exit the situation, either by denial, zoning out, shutting down, repressing it. And as an adult, I need you to understand you don't have to do this. You can call it what it is, you can confront it for what it is, because should there be a consequence, you can actually physically leave. So you don't need to mentally exit situations. You can just physically get out of a situation, and you don't need to coexist with dysfunction. You don't need to coexist with pain. So yes, for ACOAs, I hope that shed some light into some of your issues, and I'm hoping you beautiful therapeutic journeys as you try to work through them. There's nothing wrong with you. Somebody let you down, and I'm hoping as an adult you can pick better adults to surround yourself with and give yourself corrective experiences, so that what you experienced as a child, you never have to experience it as an adult again. I love you guys, and I will see you in the